My next guest grew up Catholic, but little by little, he drifted away and then found his way back to the faith in quite an inspiring and entrepreneurial way. He's now CEO of the #1 Catholic prayer app on the social media landscape today. Why and how are prayer and meditation apps helping people to rediscover their faith? Here with answers is a guy who certainly knows, the CEO and founder of Hallow, not to mention a domer, Alex Jones. Alex, thanks for being here. Before we get into the nuts and bolts of Hallow, and the reason I mentioned the domer thing will present itself in time, I want to talk about your history. Like so many, you grew up Catholic, but after high school you drifted. What inspired your search for the way back? I mean, you were essentially an atheist at one point.
Yeah, had you asked me, I would have considered myself an agnostic or atheist for most of high school and college, unfortunately. I was always fascinated with this idea of spirituality and meditation. And unfortunately, my mind did not first go to St. Teresa of Avila, St. John of the Cross, but to kind of secular meditation and secular spirituality. And something strange kept happening every time I would try to meditate or every time I would try to sit still, as my mind kept feeling pulled towards an image of the cross or the name Jesus or something Christian, which, I was agnostic, so I thought that was incredibly strange. I thought I had this really interesting discovery, and so I went to priests and nuns that I knew and said, hey, is there any way there's some sort of intersection here between this meditation thing and this faith thing? And they all laughed at me and said, yeah, we've been doing it for 2,000 years. You probably should have heard about it. It's called prayer. And, to me, I had obviously heard of prayer. But to me, prayer was just the stuff that I memorized as a kid, or just asking God for stuff or telling him what I was grateful for. And that had always just felt, they're beautiful ways to pray, but to me had always just felt like I was talking to myself or journaling in my own head. And I started discovering this whole world of contemplative and meditative prayer within the church, Lectio Divina, Ignatian spirituality, the dozens and dozens of different techniques. But I sat down one day, randomly opened up a Bible, did Lectio Divina, and it just changed my life, brought me back to my faith, and was the beginning of Hallow. We built Hallow really just for me, but for me, it's just this beautiful relationship and opportunity to listen and to surrender to Christ. So changed my life.
And look, you've talked about developing an interest in meditation around that time you were graduating from Notre Dame in mechanical engineering. What was it about meditation that interested you? Look, we were all, I was in the theater. I remember there were a lot of people doing transcendental meditation and Eastern meditation. And there was something appealing in that you're tapping into what we can't see. You're tapping into something larger than yourself. What was it about meditation that was pulling you in?
Yeah, I think, it was much broader than that. It was really spirituality and the contemplative life at a high level. But for me, I think it's really two things. I think it's, one is this deep hunger for peace. I think especially in today's world, especially in young people, especially with people who are living lives on their phones, there's just this hunger for real peace. And what does it mean to not just watch a Netflix show or not just distract yourself with social media, but find real peace? And so that was a piece of it. And I think there's also this big desire to be a part of something bigger than yourself, which you see in a bunch of different places. But I think especially in secular spirituality, you see this fascination with, going beyond yourself and finding purpose in that. And, there's no better source of peace than God, and there's no better source of, meaning and purpose than Christ and the mission that he gives you. And so for me, finding those within the Christian tradition was just, it was really surprising, which is sad. Yeah. But, it was the perfect fulfillment of it.
Alex, why do you think this rich legacy, and it is a rich legacy of, and it's imaginative, it's profound spirituality, and why do you think that's been suppressed for so long? And what did you learn from the priests and the nuns you talked to at Notre Dame in that senior year? What did they lead you to?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, there's such a rich, beautiful tradition of mysticism, of contemplative tradition, of meditative prayer within the church. I mean, Lectio Divina, Ignatian spirituality, Carmelite spirituality, imaginative prayer, sitting in silence, recollection, chant, the rosary, of course. But, there's dozens and dozens of different ways when you say, okay, well, what does it mean to sit still in silence for 10 minutes and listen to God? There's dozens of different ways to try to do that within your own life. And, that's really why we built the app, is to try to help people discover and build daily habits of all these different techniques, primarily just for me. But I think the church, over the last maybe 20, 30 years, I think has started to focus on a lot of the pieces that we've maybe missed or have fallen away from. I think there's this emphasis on truth and, the real rigorous theology and philosophy that goes into our faith, which I think, folks like Bishop Barron and Father Mike do an incredible job of reintroducing people to. I think there's beauty, which again, a lot of folks have reintroduced people to. But I think there's this missing piece, which we get really excited about, which is peace and this beautiful spirituality. And I think you're right. It's fallen away. Maybe not in the world. There's still, thousands and thousands of Christian monks. But, from a secular perspective, when people think of meditation, they don't think of a Christian monk or St. Teresa of Avila, which is heartbreaking because they should. And so that's one of the things we get really excited about is how can we help the church refocus on introducing people to the beauty of its spirituality.
And Hallow really offers guided meditations and prayer. What makes it different from other prayer apps? I mean, aside from praying the rosary with Mark Wahlberg or Jonathan Rumi, which are wonderful things, why do you think people are drawn to this app in particular?
Yeah, for us, there's a bunch of things I think we try to do to build a really great app. And for us, it's really just trying to help people build habits of prayer. And we're big fans of anybody trying to help people grow deeper in their faith life. And so we're excited to see more and more folks working on this over the last couple of years. But for us, it really does come down to just really phenomenal content. And that's what most people come to the app for. And so our goal is to try to find the best retreat leaders, the best theologians, the best contemplative leaders, the best imaginative prayer leaders, and bring them to people in their living room. So people like Father Gallagher, who teaches all the priests in the U.S. on Ignatian spirituality, Sister Miriam, who has such an incredible gift at leading people in imaginative prayer, Father Mike, Bishop Barron, Jonathan Rumi, who brings the voice of Jesus to life in a way that's just really phenomenal. Mark Wahlberg, if you want to do like a really fast rosary, is phenomenal. But also if you want to, push yourself in fasting and discipline, I think is great. So for us, it is really getting to partner with the best people I think in the world and to create some of the best content I think in the world.
Now, most of the world saw that Hallow app that ran on the Super Bowl earlier this year. That 30-second spot gave Hallow its biggest spike in downloads in the company's history. What did you think after it aired? And are you still seeing the effects of that massive shot of publicity?
Yeah, I mean, over the last, we launched maybe 5 years ago. And over the last few months, we went from, before the Super Bowl, I think we were at 14 million downloads and we're at almost 20 now. And so it took us 5 years to get to 14 and, only a couple months to jump up from 14 to almost 20. So yeah, it's really been incredible. For us, the really cool part has been seeing people who had fallen away from their faith for years, decades even, or people who were in really tough times, people who were struggling with alcoholism, people who hadn't thought about praying in maybe ever, finding their way back to God, finding some hope and peace in their life, people struggling with grief, being able to find a light again in the darkest moment of their life. And so for us, being able to see what God does in people's lives through the app, being able to reach out to people, especially those who have fallen away, has been a real blessing. And we saw a lot of that with the commercial.
What's next for you and Hallow? How do you plan to further develop and grow the app and, I guess, satisfy the expectation of this huge audience you're serving?
Yeah, for us, I mean, the whole Hallow journey has really just been a journey of surrender. So has just been us learning to go with whatever God wants us to do. And he doesn't usually give us a whole lot of heads up. He gives us maybe a couple weeks at a time. So it's tough for me to guess what he's going to do in the next couple of years. I mean, it's been really cool for us to see internationally. We were #1 in Brazil for Lent and many Latin American countries, the Philippines. We have 7, 8 different languages now. A good chunk in Europe, but the big focus, I mean, I take my faith super seriously now and have for, since my reconversion, but, and it's an honor to get to pray with folks like me who pray every day and take their faith super seriously. We have bishops and monks and priests on the app. But the real soft spot in our hearts and in our mission is reaching out to the people who have really fallen away. And so that's what we really focus on is how can we reach out to the people who are really the most lost and introduce them to the love and the peace of Christ and welcome them into a relationship with God. And so that's always what we've been focused on and what we'll continue to focus on.
Yeah, those people are the ones who really need it most. I mean, they're searching, they're hurting. I mean, the part of the rationale, I think the impetus for Mother Angelica to found this network was to reach people in their pain, in their suffering, with this message of truth and hope, to throw them a lifeline. And you're doing that as well. Just very quickly, Alex, because you've shared some of this with me. Tell me about the early days of Hallow, how this started. I mean, this was two guys living in an apartment together trying to, code this thing and cobble this together. Tell me about that walk of faith, and was this always an assured thing that this was going to work?
No. I mean, the chances that this thing worked were maybe, 1%. And that's what we assumed going into it. I mean, for me, it was just what I thought God was asking me to do. And at that time, I had just come into a new relationship with him. And so I couldn't really disobey him. And so I had to do it, even though it was crazy. I mean, we drained our 401k account, took whatever that 40% penalty is to try to, have a developer help us. And we coded a bit of it. And my wife was incredible, supported me while she was teaching before we had any kids. But yeah, it was just me and a couple folks trying to code this thing and trying to build something that we loved. And then, for us, it was really just a fun project. Honestly, for me, it was just, hey, maybe this can help me build this habit of prayer, and that, might help me get into heaven. So that seems worth a couple months. But, a handful of friends and family started using it. And one of them actually was my aunt, so I'll shorten the story. But her son, my cousin, had just passed away, and randomly in his sleep, it was heartbreaking. He was 40, in his mid 40s. He had just gotten married. His wife had just gotten pregnant, and he died in his sleep. It was her only son, my godmother, and she was heartbroken and hadn't been. We have this big, massive family. We're all focused on she hadn't been eating, she hadn't been getting out of bed, and we were all focused on how do we help, like in some small way, how could I possibly help her get through like what is just a heartbreakingly difficult moment. And she started, I didn't know she was using the app, but she found it somehow. And she must have been one of the first 10 people to start using it. And she sent us this note that just said, hey, it was Christmas time, and she said, it was Advent. And she said, I just wanted to let you know, Advent is always a pretty stressful time. I have to figure out how I'm traveling, how I'm getting all these gifts for all my grandkids, all this stuff. And I just didn't think I'd be able to do it this year without my only son. And I just faced it with this immense sense of dread and this pain and this darkness. And I just wanted to let you know that I was able to find some sense of hope, some sense of light, because of these meditations on this app, which were really just sitting in silence. And so it was just God bringing her this incredible love and this support in her darkest moment. And I broke down in tears. I fell apart on my floor, and I was like, man, we better keep working on this, because if there is one more person out there, if we work for the next 50 years of our life, we drain all whatever money we have, everybody hates us, our reputations are ruined, whatever it is. But we get one more note like that, we get to see God do that in one more person's life, it will have been worth it. And we just get these notes like this every week now. And so it's just this incredible blessing for us to get to continue to work on.
Alex Jones, we'll leave it there. I love that, the final message there. If you let God work and get out of the way, he always does. But that walk of faith isn't always easy, but boy, the fruits are voluminous and incredible. So thank you for what you do. You can get Hallow at the Apple App Store or Google Play, wherever you download your apps, or visit hallow.com. Thank you, Alex.
Thanks for having me, Raymond.